Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 25th of May, 2021. Right, everyone, let's get into it. So, bit of drama on crypto Twitter over the last 24 hours, stemming from this tweet and a tweet from Michael Saylor. But this tweet from Elon Musk basically said, spoke with North American Bitcoin miners. They committed to publish current and planned renewable usage and to ask miners WW to do so. Worldwide, I assume that's standing for to do so. Potentially promising. Now, Michael Saylor said something, I guess, like similar to this, and I saw this and I was like, this is not good. I don't like it when anyone kind of like, I guess like any kind of like centralized councils spin up. I mean, Michael Saylor was talking about creating a council for this sort of stuff and to get them all together in a room and talk to them. And the fact that this discussion was held behind closed doors was also against like the ethos of this space and everything like that. So just overall, kind of like weird situation here. And then that's not to say that like, they can't do this if they want. Of course they can do this. And the systems that we're building need to be built to kind of resist these sorts of things. But at the same time, I don't know what Elon's doing, right? Like, what is he doing in crypto? He's still promoting Doge. He's kind of completely ignoring Ethereum. He's talking about Bitcoin miners and making it more renewable and all this sort of stuff after kind of saying that its energy usage, is a hindrance and all this sort of stuff. I don't know what his deal is, honestly. Maybe he's playing like 4D chess and he's like playing us all and he's got like some big plan or whatever. But I don't know. And I really wish he would focus more of his efforts on Ethereum and DeFi because I actually think that he'd get a lot out of that. I think that it speaks to a lot of what he was trying to do with PayPal, creating this fully decentralized money and kind of like financial ecosystem on the internet, or at least using the internet. But yeah, it's just sad to see him kind of like doing this sort of stuff. Now, I'm not going to say that everyone was cheering for this. They certainly weren't. I did put out a tweet today and I said that it was just like insane to see some Bitcoiners cheering for this. Like not all of them. I saw a lot of them pushing back on it, but there were some out there being like, this is great. Yeah, let's do this. It's great for renewable energy usage and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, it's not great to create like a council with all the miners on it. That's so bad. Not even because the council could go rogue or go evil. It's because it just makes miners easier to spot, right? It becomes like a target for regulators and for governments to come down on. So that whole thing just kind of puzzled me. And maybe they'll get enough pushback that they'll scrap this idea altogether. I think it's Michael Saylor that's actually kind of like pushing this. Elon just kind of put out this tweet here, but then Elon is also doing his Dogecoin stuff. So who knows? As I said, who knows with that guy? But yeah, I just wanted to kind of mention that because that was probably something you saw on Twitter over the last 24 hours, and I wanted to kind of clarify what was happening there. It just seems like very random at this stage. It's not very transparent. We really don't know what's going on here. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. But something that I'll be keeping an eye on for sure. So, and I also saw some talk today on Twitter about how Ethereum's network upgrades or hard forks are considered like a bug, right, in Ethereum, and that it's what makes Ethereum centralized. And Ethereum can never be decentralized because it does regular hard forks. And I'm like, this is just insane. Ethereum's kind of network upgrades or hard forks, as they're called, are a feature, not a bug, right? This is the way the Ethereum protocol evolves, gets better, improves over time, and improves its security over time. And obviously, like the Bitcoiner camp has taken a hard stance to this, where they believe no hard forks, only soft forks. But and there's a post from Vitalik Buterin that goes over this that he posted in 2017. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but something got to do with soft forks versus hard forks, where he argued that soft forks are actually more coercive than hard forks. So maybe I should take a step back here and explain the kind of views around this. So from what I can tell, Bitcoiners consider hard forks to be coercive because they are not kind of like, they believe they're not opt-in. They believe that, basically you have to follow the rest of the community if everyone kind of like upgrades their software, upgrades their full nodes, all the kind of like miners and stuff upgrade and economic network, and the community's basically, majority in favor of the new network upgrade. But that's the whole point. The same thing would happen in Bitcoin if Bitcoin did hard forks. If the majority of the community wanted Bitcoin to hard fork, it would hard fork. There's nothing stopping that from happening. And the nodes, maybe there's 10% of nodes that don't want to follow that, that hard fork. Well, they would split off and become a minority chain in that instance. They wouldn't be Bitcoin anymore. they would be something like Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin SV, right? There'd be a fork at the end of the day of Bitcoin. So, and then Bitcoiners will argue, well, we do soft forks instead. Well, soft forks can be argued to be more coercive because they actually do change protocol rules, and they're kind of like not totally opt-in, because to get these features and to stay, I guess, like at feature parity with the rest of the network, you kind of have to adopt this sort of stuff as well. But Vitalik's blog post explains this much better than I can, just briefly here. And definitely just Google it. I think just Google Vitalik Buterin soft forks versus hard forks, and you'll probably be able to find it there. But one other thing that I wanted to talk about with regards to this as well is that it's all about the social contract and the social layer. And I talk about this a lot on the Refuel. Ethereum has had the social contract that it will continue to upgrade for as long as it needs to. There has been, I think over 10 network upgrades at this stage. We have a major one that's coming with the merge, right? Because you could argue that ETH2 in its current state, just the beacon chain, is a separate network altogether, which it is. It's not a hard fork of Ethereum or anything like that. So once that merge happens, that'll be the biggest upgrade in Ethereum's history. But other than that, we have things coming up, like we just did Berlin, right? We have 1559 coming up in London. There's a few others out there coming up. And once the merge happens, there'll be more that still happen on Ethereum. Like network upgrades, hard forks, whatever you want to call them, are part of Ethereum's social layer. And if you're not comfortable with them, well, then you're not comfortable with Ethereum, and Ethereum's not going to interest you at the end of the day. And that's not to say that every kind of like EIP or Ethereum improvement proposal that goes into every hard fork is something that is good for everyone. There is definitely, minorities that kind of like get hurt by hard forks sometimes, depending. For example, whenever the opcode gas costs change, there is inevitably some kind of like user or some kind of like developer that will get adversely affected by this. But the thing is that it's for the greater good of the entire chain. If there's, if 90% of the chain is, the ecosystem is fine with it, but 10% isn't, well, obviously you're going to go with the 90%, because these things run on super majority. It is not it's not like a democratic system where if someone gets 51% of the vote, they win. That would mean that 49% of the people would actually just fork off and make their own blockchain. Whereas in a democratic government, you can't do that, right? You can have your own party, but you can't have two kind of like federal governments, for example, running at the same time. They can only in majority. There can only be one majority kind of government there. Whereas with crypto networks, you can have two completely separate kind of networks, running. Like you can have Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV. You can have Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, and they can have their own kind of communities and beliefs or whatever. But to upgrade the actual main kind of chain, you need a super majority, which is typically, I would say, over 90% of the ecosystem in favor. And the way you measure this is difficult, right? It's not an easy thing to measure. Within Ethereum, you look at things like, what are the core developers saying? What are the researchers saying? What is the community at large saying? What are the economic nodes saying, like the exchanges and things like that? What are the node runners saying? Are they like upgraded to the newest kind of like hard fork and things like that? And there's so many different participants, and that's how you get to kind of what we call rough consensus, because there's no on-chain voting for Ethereum or anything like that. So kind of like that's how it happens at the end there. But I'm not going to go through the entire Ethereum network upgrade process here. I just wanted to point out that Ethereum network upgrades are definitely a feature and not a bug. And if you're not comfortable with them, then unfortunately Ethereum is probably not for you. But I'm sure all of you watching and listening to this are definitely comfortable with that and are fine with that and believe in kind of like technology progressing over time instead of stagnating. And that's not to say that Ethereum won't one day ossify and kind of sit in place, but that'll happen once basically we've done most of the things we wanted to do for the network, and that's still far away. There's still plenty of things that we want to do on the Ethereum network to keep upgrading it. And I do think that there'll never be a time where Ethereum will just completely ossify. It'll just be a point where maybe there's only one network upgrade every 5 years because we've discovered some breakthrough technology that needs to go into the network because it would greatly improve the network's feature set. But in saying that, it becomes a lot harder as time goes on to do these things because you have a much bigger community. And, if you wait 5 years between upgrades, well, who knows how hard it would be to get an upgrade in at that stage. But yeah, we'll see how that future pans out. We might not know for decades here if that, by the time that comes around. But I am definitely excited to see how that all pans out. So Token Terminal announced today that Token Terminal V2 is now live. So for those of you who don't know, Token Terminal is a really, really great metrics tracking website. I use it all the time. Basically, you can go to the Token Terminal interface and see all kind of stats around different things here. And I'm just loading it up here. Once it loads, so you got metrics for basically like so many different protocols, whether that's DeFi protocols or kind of like, I think they might have NFT stuff going on here, but they do focus on DeFis, but other layer ones, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever. And this basically gives you just kind of metrics on like revenue generated by these networks. You can see here, tracking like basically like CoinGecko would in terms of like market cap and price and all that sort of good stuff there. Revenue, price to sales ratios. I've gone over this before in one of the refuels, and I think I've covered Token Terminal before on the Daily Gwei Data Pump series. But this is basically data that I think serious crypto investors and specifically non-crypto investors from the traditional world are going to want to look at. They're going to want to know how much revenue these protocols create. How much of that revenue is sustainable? Where is that revenue going to? What's it being used for? Blah, 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 blah. All this sort of good stuff here. So I think this is really important. But their V2 includes a bunch of new features. They've got key metrics charts now. They've got revenue sharing charts. Other than charts, they've got like you can access the underlying data sets for all of their data and a few other bells and whistles here as well. So yeah, if you haven't checked out Token Terminal V2, it'll be linked in the YouTube description. You can go check it out there. So Pete Kim from Coinbase here put out a teaser tweet saying that they're getting early access to Arbitrum for USDC, and then exciting. This is really exciting. Arbitrum, as I mentioned on yesterday's refuel, their DevNet is going live in 3 days, the 28th of May. And I expect them to go live with a lot of premier DeFi apps and a lot of infrastructure. I consider USDC and stablecoins to be part of this infrastructure. Obviously USDC is a huge part of DeFi, even though it's not decentralized, it is still a huge part of DeFi. And Pete is one of the core engineers of USDC here at Coinbase. So it's really great to see him teasing that it's coming to Arbitrum. I'm sure they're going to deploy it to Optimism, and I'm sure they're going to deploy it to, StarkWare, ZK Sync, everywhere, right? And, you might be thinking to yourself, well, USDC is kind of like just a token. Anyone can kind of like put it on these layer twos. It's like, yes, that's true. But you also want to have support from bigger players, the big players behind this, because, this might be signaling that Coinbase plans to support Arbitrum layer 2 withdrawals and deposits, just like OKX announced the other day they would do so. And maybe they only support it for USDC. I think that's fine, right? Like getting into Arbitrum using just USDC would be really cool. I mean, you can go from an exchange to Arbitrum, and then the fees on there, I think, will be free to begin with, or very low fee. And I'm sure they're going to have meta transactions where you can pay with USDC for fees, and it just pays for, just uses ETH in the back end. But that'll be huge. And I hope that they release something like this. I hope that Coinbase supports more than Optimism. As I've said in the past, they support Optimism through their mobile wallet app right now, but they're also closely aligned with Optimism. But I don't think that means that they can't support these other solutions. So again, very, very excited for Arbitrum's DevNet on May 28th, because we'll be able to see what developers are ready to launch on Arbitrum. And then, as I said, in June, we'll probably see them on mainnet here. So StarkWare put out their Black Wednesday metrics, so the metrics from the crash that happened last week, and this was for the DYDX protocol running on StarkWare's tech here. So during Black Wednesday, there was 28,000 transactions, including 4,600 liquidations. It cost 1,275 gas per transaction on average, and 4,700 transactions per proof on average. So that means 4,007 transactions were rolled up into one proof, and this proof was posted to the Ethereum main chain. All of this consumed only 0.06% of Ethereum's gas over a volatile 17-hour window. Now, if we do some kind of like extrapolation here and say that all these transactions were done on the Ethereum mainnet, this would have cost so much money in fees, because $12.75 gas per transaction That doesn't exist on Ethereum. I'm pretty sure the cheapest transaction on Ethereum is sending an doing an ETH transfer, and that's 21,000 gas, just an ETH transfer. So the reason why this is so cheap here on layer 2 is because they're basically taking all the transactions and putting them into a roll-up, right? Putting 4,700 transactions into a proof or a roll-up proof here and putting that on chain instead of the 4,700 individual transactions. Because you can imagine, even if it was only ETH transactions, it would be 4,700 times, say the Gwei went up to like over 1,000 during Black Wednesday. So a simple ETH transfer was, I think, like $50 or something at those gas prices. So you can imagine that it would be like, say, 5,000 transactions times 50. You would be looking at $250,000, I guess, like for just like these transactions to be done on the Ethereum network, whereas on layer 2 it's obviously much cheaper. So cool to see these stats out of DYDX here. StarkWare's tech is obviously battle tested and getting more and more battle tested as time goes on, and these kind of like, I guess, wild swings in the market just really help to kind of do that as well. So kudos to StarkWare and DYDX here. So Kyle Davies from 3RS Capital put out a great tweet today, and I wrote about this in the Daily Gwei newsletter today, but I'll go through it here. Basically, he said the term alt or altcoin is a boomer term. We don't live in a 2017 fractal of Bitcoin plus forks. The crypto market has evolved. Long live productive assets. I couldn't have put it better myself, to be honest. I absolutely hate the term alt or altcoin. It does not describe the current market at all. You know, the only times that I would say that this term was relevant was in the very early days when everything was a fork of Bitcoin and it only had like a few tweaks. So for example, Litecoin is obviously a fork of Bitcoin. It had a few tweaks to it, a few parameters changed, and it was considered like an alternative to Bitcoin. There was Namecoin and Peercoin, which did a few different things, but still, those are the things that you would call alts. Whereas Ethereum is a brand new system. It was not a fork of Bitcoin. It was built from the ground up, in 2014, launched in 2015, and all the assets on top of Ethereum, all the tokens, are not altcoins, right? How are they altcoins? Like they do not have any kind of like link to Bitcoin at all. And I think it's this term is just like a relic at this point, and I think it's used by a lot of people because of the fact that it's just easier to refer to, everything as like alts. But the funny thing is that people say, there's Bitcoin and there's alts. But lately I've been seeing people say, a lot more people say, even people on the fence, whether they're like, they're not Bitcoin maximalists, they're not Ethereum maximalists, they're not anything. They're just like, people that are just right in the center here. They're saying, well, there's BTC and there's ETH and then there's all the other coins, right? So ETH just in my opinion, ETH has always stood on its own, but it's good to see more and more people saying this now. And the hilarious thing is that what happens when Ethereum flips Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin now an alt, right? Are the Bitcoin maxis going to call Bitcoin an alt now? Like, is it based on the market cap? I don't even think the term has a kind of a clear definition at this point. I think it's just an easy way to refer to everything other than Bitcoin. But as I said, these days, I think it refers to everything other than Bitcoin and ETH. And I still think that's inaccurate because we have lots of different assets now, right? We have DeFi assets, which stand on their own. As Kyle says here, long live productive assets. Well, DeFi are productive assets. Like, look at all the tokens and look at all the cash flows going to those tokens and the token holders and things like that. And on top of that, we have other assets like NFTs. We have other assets like utility tokens, like, for example, Filecoin and Arweave. Like, they're built from the ground up. They're kind of like completely different systems to Ethereum and Bitcoin. So why should their kind of platforms or coins be called alts? They shouldn't. So I think, just in general, like, I try not to use the term altcoin. As I said, it's outdated. It doesn't describe the current state of the market. Is just really just generally bad, overall to use because it confuses people. And I think that if you kind of like ask people for the definition of altcoin, you'll get different answers these days. Yes, probably most people will say, oh, well, it refers to everything other than Bitcoin. But then if you drill them on that and say, okay, well, what did it originally refer to? A lot of people won't even be able to tell you things like Namecoin or Peercoin. Yes, Litecoin, because it's still kind of like got attention on it. But these early things, they wouldn't even be able to know. So I think just, I guess, like from that point of view, it's really just a term that a lot of traders use to refer to things other than Bitcoin. And it's just an easy way for people to refer to assets other than Bitcoin. But outdated term. I'm not going to be using it. I encourage you to not use it. Whenever I talk about other things, I say like DeFi tokens or utility coins or Web3 stuff or NFTs. These things have names, right? Or ERC20 tokens. You don't have to call them an altcoin anymore. And I think the term, I think ERC20 has enough brand awareness and NFTs have enough brand awareness that you can use those terms and people will actually understand what you're talking about. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. There's more kind of like detail in the Daily Gwei newsletter if you want to go check that out as well. So an interesting proposal from the Yearn community here called Own the Land on which we operate. And the land that Yearn operates on is obviously Ethereum. And essentially the summary of this is that basically what the proposal suggests is that instead of Yearn buying only YFI tokens with their revenue, they should also be buying ETH with the profits that the protocol generates as well. And the logic is that because ETH is the land that they live on, they should be stacking ETH. And this is just like a way to align themselves even more with, like Ethereum, and also for covering operational capital, like having to pay for gas fees and stuff like that for rebalancing vaults or kind of like deploying new contracts or upgrading contracts or doing maintenance or whatever you want to call it here. And I actually found this kind of part interesting, where there's a background section here. And what they say is, ETH is going to be the only layer one. A multi-chain world is really just an Ethereum plus roll-up world. We know that. It's still an edge because of the large amounts of dumb money in crypto. Let's use our edge to make our system stronger. I think it's a funny take, this one, because if they're referring to smart contract blockchains instead of layer one here, I would argue yes. But I do think there's room for some of these other things like Web3 kind of like dedicated chains. So for example, I still think there's room for, like, as I mentioned, Filecoin and Arweave. I still think there's room for maybe a couple of others out there. And I think, I don't hold these tokens. I'm not just shilling my bags or anything like that. And as someone who obviously believes Ethereum has already won the smart contract blockchain race and will obviously like persist into the future, I just would like to clarify that I layer one here has to be kind of like, I guess, like defined, because layer one refers to basically every blockchain with its own validator set. And also I would consider Ethereum aligned kind of like layer ones, or, the old term side chains like the Polygon POS chain is also something that I can see persisting into the future, though I do hope that they move to a roll-up eventually. But generally, I do believe this. A multi-chain world is really just Ethereum and roll-ups, because, as I mentioned before, if you can get everything that you can get from other chains in a roll-up, that is the scalability, the low fees, while still retaining the security of Ethereum, why wouldn't you? And you get the ecosystem of Ethereum as well, and like an easy kind of like bridge in, you get the Ethereum alignment, all that good stuff. You can kind of see how important Ethereum alignment is for this ecosystem. I can guarantee you that if Polygon advertised itself as an Ethereum killer, it would not have gotten anywhere near the usage as it has today. I would not have joined as an advisor, and I would not be promoting them at all as well. So, and I'm not the only one. There'd be so many people in the Ethereum community that wouldn't even be talking about Polygon in any positive light. But they did the right thing where they aligned themselves with Ethereum, and they've done a lot to kind of like show that. They haven't just said so, they've kind of aligned their actions with it. And that's exactly what Yearn, I think, would do here if this proposal passed for them to buy ETH with their profits as well as YFI. So yeah, there's a bit of discussion in the thread here. I'll link this in the YouTube description and you can go check it out for yourself. So Stani put out an interesting tweet here today where he said, the most valuable institutions will be community-owned networks powered by DeFi and cryptoeconomics. DAOs, essentially, is what he's describing here. They don't necessarily have to be DAOs. They can just be, they can even be centralized institutions. They don't have to be decentralized. But I think the point here is that I think these networks will be bigger because of the fact that they are networks, right? They're global. They're not constrained by any geographic barriers. They're not constrained by, human stuff at the end of the day, because they don't discriminate. You can be an Anon person and be high up in these kind of like protocols. Like there are tons of Anon people that have reputations within this industry and really great reputations. There's even an Anon kind of like a completely Anon investment fund called eGirl Capital, which has actually been performing very, very well. And that's kind of like got participation from mostly anonymous or pseudonymous people. And some of the top protocols in this industry are founded by pseudonymous kind of like people, like Alchemix, for example. So from that point of view, there's no reason why these things can't be the biggest in the world because, as I said, global, don't discriminate. It has access to kind of like a network where value flows as freely as information flows on the internet. And we have cryptoeconomics, which basically acts as incentive mechanisms to supercharge these kind of communities and get people involved. Because once everyone has a stake in something, they want to see it succeed. And there's no better kind of like way to see this than seeing how much people support Ethereum and Bitcoin as networks because they hold ETH and BTC. They want to see that value appreciate over time, but they also care about the network and they want to see the network grow. And they know that a strong asset like ETH or BTC means a strong network because more people will get interested in the network. And this is especially true for Ethereum, where, ETH obviously is used within Ethereum for a lot of different things. And people understand that if the ETH value goes up, there's more stuff we can do on Ethereum. There's more economic bandwidth that we unlock. And it's just better overall here. So I totally agree with Stani here. And I think that's just like a really great way to put it in his tweet here. So on that note, I put out a tweet in response, I guess, to some of the news that came out yesterday that Ray Dalio is essentially, he was talking about Bitcoin at Consensus, their event that they've got going on right now. But he said that he owns Bitcoin. I don't know if he owns it himself or he owns it as part of Bridgewater, his firm. But he also said something about Ethereum where he said, for efficiency, it seems like Ethereum. Now, I'm assuming, I don't know what he meant exactly by efficiency here, but the fact that he's paying attention to Ethereum is really cool. And that's why I put out this tweet where I said, everyone finds their way to Ethereum and ETH eventually. As I've said so many times on the Refuel, no one stops at Bitcoin. Absolutely no one stops at Bitcoin because it is impossible, even for the most maximalist of maximalists in the Bitcoin land, it is impossible for you to just pay attention to Bitcoin because you will still get exposed to everything else. And that's why Bitcoin maximalists I consider to be a minority, because I've seen plenty of hardcore Bitcoiners, maybe I wouldn't call them maximalists, but almost maximalists, be interested in Ethereum and even use it. Even if you're a maximalist, you're still probably using Ethereum because it's providing value to you in some way. So this tweet, everyone finds their way to Ethereum and ETH eventually, just holds true for absolutely everyone, I believe. Eventually people, like I always say as well, that the only reason why these companies, or a major reason why these companies are buying BTC instead of ETH, is because they just haven't discovered ETH yet, right? They haven't discovered the value prop of ETH and Ethereum yet, and they don't understand ultrasound money. They don't understand all our, insider memes and everything like that. But eventually they will. This is what we call information asymmetry. This is what we call alpha. You get alpha by understanding things before most people do. Yes, it's risky. It was risky. I would say that it was risky to buy ETH in 2018 and 2019. Riskier than other things maybe. But at the end of the day, the risk that you took on has paid off greatly. Even after this crash, if you had bought it between $100 and $200, you're still sitting pretty. So at the end of the day, from an investment point of view, it's great, but also from a kind of adoption point of view, Ethereum just offers so much things to so many different people, right? It offers, as I've said before, it offers a million different doors to enter its ecosystem through. You can do it through DeFi, you can do it through NFTs, you can do it through DAOs, you can do it through every different way here. You're not restricted. Whereas Bitcoin really does optimize for itself and restricts you to just being interested in BTC, the asset. If you're not interested in digital gold or BTC as an asset, then you really aren't interested in Bitcoin. If you're interested in NFTs, and maybe you're not interested in DeFi, you're still interested in Ethereum by default because Ethereum owns the culture around NFTs, and that's where all the popular NFTs are, and that's where they continue to be. So from that point of view, I think that eventually everyone finds their way to Ethereum, and that's just positive overall for the Ethereum ecosystem, of course. Speaking of that, Packy McCormick here, who writes a newsletter called Not Boring, or is at notboring.co here, put together a piece called Own the Internet, which is basically a bull case for Ethereum. Now, this is quite a long piece here. It went to over 50,000 people, which is really cool to see. And I'm assuming that a lot of these people aren't crypto natives because this newsletter is not just focused on crypto, but this is quite a long piece here. I don't know how long it took me to read, but it's quite long. It goes over a lot of the same stuff that we already know, ultrasound money, what 1559 means, how the Ethereum network accrues value, DeFi, DAOs, all that sort of stuff. It probably isn't going to give any of you new information if you've been listening to me on the Refuel for some months now, or you've just been in the Ethereum ecosystem for some time. But I still think it's worth reading because it's a good way to get kind of like, I guess, context from someone who's not in the ecosystem, because the way, I guess, Packy kind of like put together this piece is very different to how I would put it together, for example, because he speaks a different language to me. He's definitely not someone who, lives and breathes Ethereum all the time. He's coming at this from a different kind of mindset. And I think he's coming at this from like a traditional kind of like tech mindset, because he called Ethereum the XL of the XL of blockchains, or of kind of like crypto, which I think is very apt, right? XL is the most used software in the world still to this day. I think there's like 1 billion people who use XL semi-regularly, because it's just used absolutely everywhere, right? We've all used it for one reason or another. It lets you do anything. And he's got like a chart here that says, XL eventually got kind of like unbundled, and there's a bunch of different tools that kind of like took what XL did and kind of like became standalone apps here. But I think that when you kind of look at Ethereum, I think he argued here that Ethereum can't fulfill everything, and things that Ethereum can't do will be spun out into their own platforms. I don't think that's true. I think what will happen is that these things will get spun out to rollups if Ethereum can't do it due to cost issues. And then those rollups would be, I guess, like obviously secured by Ethereum here. So when you think about that, you could say that Ethereum is more like the internet, where the internet exists, but all these other things are built on top of the internet, but they didn't subsume the internet. They didn't take it over. They still added value to the internet. If the internet had a token, imagine how much it would be worth. And if it had some way to capture all the value of things built on top of it, just imagine how much it would be worth. A lot. Like, let me tell you that much. Probably hundreds of trillions of dollars, I would have to say. That's, to me, what Ethereum is like, and that's what all the apps built on Ethereum are like, and the rollups and things like that. So, yeah. Anyway, highly recommend going and reading this piece. I think you'll get a lot out of it. It's a different kind of like framing than I would have written it, but it's very good nonetheless. All right, last up here, I just wanted to shout out that Nethermind, an ETH1 core, an Ethereum core client, specifically focusing on ETH1 here, is hiring right now. So they're hiring remotely for interns, software engineers, researchers, and DevOps across the following areas: protocol engineering, the ETH1 to ETH2 merge, MEV, layer 2 scaling, smart contract development, and DeFi. If you're interested in any of that stuff, which I'm sure a lot of you are, and you fit into any of these categories here, definitely reach out to Nethermind at hello@nethermind.io with your kind of like interest here. As I said, there's a lot of I've said this before, there's a lot of teams hiring right now, but it really depends on which team you want to join, if they're doing remote, what you're interested in doing. I think most teams within the Ethereum ecosystem right now are doing remote work, not just because of COVID, but because obviously crypto and Ethereum are global networks and everything like that. So it doesn't make sense to just say, oh, well, we'd only hire in this city, because your talent pool is really the world at the end of the day, and you shouldn't be optimizing just for who's in your city. So anyway, if you're interested in this, definitely reach out. But that's it for today's episode, everyone. So thank you again for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the newsletter. Join the Discord channel. And I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.